A Lufthansa flight bringing puppies from the Ukraine to Canada arrived in Toronto. There were over 500, and out of those, at least 3 dozen died in transit or arrived dead or died at the airport shortly after arrival. This was discovered because a person concerned about animal welfare was picking up a cat that was arriving from Russia, and she saw dead bodies of French bulldogs being put out for the trash and garbage bags.
Welcome to Puppy Scammers, a podcast with an ugly name but a beautiful purpose. This is episode 4, Importers and Brokers. Today we have a special guest with us, Brenda Cuomo-Watson, who is also featured on the CBC's program The National Segments on puppy importers and brokers. Brenda is one of the founders of the French Bulldog Club of Central Canada and is a longtime member of the CKC. She has recently brought to light somewhere in the ballpark of 76% of the bulldog breeders listed on the CKC are breeding against the standards for the breed. Welcome to the podcast, Brenda, and thank you so much for being here. Why don't you give our listeners a quick background about yourself and what brought you to the podcast today?
Okay, my name is Brenda Cuomo-Watson, and I'm a long-term member of the CKC, as well as I've been involved in showing and breeding French Bulldogs since 1992.
Why French Bulldogs? What do you like about the breed? What attracted you to the breed?
Well, I always appreciated their looks, the fact that they're a little pocket-sized bulldog breed, and I was fascinated by their personalities. When I was a kid, I had got a pocketbook of dog breeds, and going back to all the way when I was 8, I found that French Bulldogs were the most compatible for what I was looking for. But I didn't get my first dog until I was in my 20s.
So you said 92? That's when you started breeding?
It's when I first started showing.
Showing, okay. So you must have had your share of breeding done as well.
I have been involved in breeding on a few occasions. I have a lot of questions about the ethics of breeding dogs and also concerns about the health in my chosen breed, French Bulldogs. So it took a very long time till I felt comfortable with going ahead and doing it. I had my first litter in 2012, and most recently I have a litter right now of 2 puppies that are going on 2 weeks old.
Oh, so that's the squealing I'm hearing in the background, the little puppies there.
Yes.
Okay, so let's dive into this. And so today's focus being importers of puppies, specifically, I guess French Bulldogs would be your specialty, but I guess this would apply to every other breed because just French Bulldogs not being the only breed that is imported, and as well as brokers and how they operate. So why don't we get into that a little bit and maybe some of your experiences dealing with these types of people, the importers and stuff.
Sure. Well, let me just explain how I came across them. And it was about 10 or 11 years ago. I had a French Bulldog, and I wanted to get a second one. And I thought at the time that rather than go on a waiting list for a breeder in Canada, I would, do what most people do, which is look in the buy and sell ads and look for a puppy that way, since I wasn't planning on showing it. I came across a breeder in Timmins, Ontario, who, although she always seemed to have puppies, came across in her emails as if she was very sincere and very involved in their health. I soon discovered that the puppy that I did get from her came from imported parents that she had brought over from Eastern Europe. And I also discovered that with time, she was bringing over multiple puppies at the same time from Europe on an ongoing basis. And that was my introduction into puppy brokers and Eastern European puppy mills shipping their dogs to Canada.
So why is it such a big issue for people to be importing from these places? So, compared to just having, breeding them here. So what's the difference from bringing them in or breeding them here?
Well, I think the biggest concern is the differences, instant gratification and impulse buying. Most people don't want to wait to get a puppy. When they make a decision that they want one very quickly. And for example, with French bulldogs, they tend to have very small litters, and just because of the way that they're built, and so most people do have to go on a waiting list for a puppy if they're going to buy from a ethical, responsible breeder in Canada. And we're seeing with COVID, for example, that most people don't want to wait. And so the demand has increased remarkably during this time of the pandemic. And quite simply, there are not enough good, ethical, responsible breeders in Canada with puppies at all times.
So it's obviously a supply and demand issue. Not enough supply, too much demand. So that's why these importers are flourishing right now, I would assume.
I would say that that's part of it. I think the other part of it is simply lack of education for the public. They don't know where to start to look in the right places or how to find a good breeder to deal with. And I'd like to stress good breeders are so important because they will support you for the lifetime of your puppy. If you have any questions or concerns, issues about health, etc., they will be there for you. Whereas with the imported puppies, they're literally being torn from their mothers at the age of 7 or 8 weeks, shipped over here to brokers, and there's really no accountability for these puppies and their future.
Yeah. So how would one spot an importer, or do we want to get into things to look for, or did you want to specifically sort of give us some more information on how these importers are operating?
I'll start off with giving you more info on how they operate.
Yeah.
What I found out when I got the puppy, this was back in 2008, was that this person had imported the parents from Eastern Europe, and that she continued to import multiple dogs while I knew her. She also unfortunately didn't support the puppy that I got from her, which developed severe back problems before the age of 2. And sadly had to be put down. I was cast adrift. I maintained communication with her because she said she would make good. But during that time, I found out how they operate. Now, she is born and raised in Canada, but she's dealing with puppy mills all the time in Eastern Europe, bringing them over, multiple dogs at a time. And then if she's not selling them directly to the public on Kijiji or online services, even Facebook, she's selling them to a very shady underground of breeders who breed strictly for profit. So, for example, fad colors are very popular with Frenchies, although it's a disqualification against the standard. She would bring over multiple blue and blue brindle dogs, black and tan ones, and then if they weren't selling to the public as cute puppies, she would sell them as breeding stock to other very questionable breeders throughout North America.
If the importer brings the puppies over, and they're already diseased or they have some sort of ailment, and breeding them, it'll just perpetuate that ailment, would it not? Or perpetuate the sickness and keep it going, right?
It would, exactly. And a good example of that is something called Giardia. Giardia is an intestinal parasite. I believe it's amoebic, but it's passed on from the mother to the puppies. It's easy for a dog to catch it in very filthy, in a very filthy environment. It's very hard to treat. It's hard to eradicate. But once, for example, a mother is treated, she is a carrier. She still has it, but it's not manifesting itself. And what happens is, like worms, when she has a litter of puppies, it will be passed on automatically to all of those puppies, and they will pass it on to their puppies. So it becomes multi-generational, and it's very hard to get rid of. Just proper treatment and probably a cost of only $20 to $30 for medication will take care of the dog. But unfortunately, most of these brokers are not even willing to spend that sort of money on a puppy before they sell it, since they're trying to maximize profit.
Which could come back to bite them in the behind, so to speak. Lawsuits and all kinds of things, I would imagine.
In a way, it doesn't bite them in the behind because the puppy buyer is the one that has to pay for the vet treatment. In most cases, the brokers say that it has nothing to do with them, that the dog was fine when they sold it, and so then it just carries on without any type of repercussions for the broker.
Now, I've also read that Giardia can be transferred to humans.
Yes,
do you know anything about?
It's very contagious. Unfortunately, Giardia is very common. There are different strains. Some of the ones that are coming in with imported puppies now are antibiotic resistant, which is a huge problem. But for example, I was on holiday in Mexico many years ago, and it turned out that the water filtration system wasn't working, and a number of people on the same holiday with us came down with Giardia. They were tested at their doctor's office, and quite literally, in the case of one couple, they came back one night and they found a van for the Center for Disease Control sitting on their front lawn, waiting for them to return because Giardia is so it's so easily caught. It's relatively easy to treat after, but then again, people can become carriers after they receive it. I think the biggest concern is proper hygiene for cleaning up, and one of the reasons why it continues even when adult dogs become or puppies become asymptomatic is that it's extremely hard to eradicate from the environment. Bleach doesn't kill it necessarily.
Wow.
You have to scrub every single nook and cranny, edges along the walls, up the walls, anywhere where contamination could have occurred, and it's so easy to track. By accident after you've cleaned up from a dog, and for it to get literally into the floor, into the grout and the tiles. So now I have to also qualify that Giardia does exist in Canada. It has many nicknames here. One of them is beaver fever because it's common. It's common in damp, wet areas, and it can be transferred from the ground through the feet and licking to dogs, and in dog parks and that kind of thing as well. So not just naturally in forests and stuff. It's very difficult, and for many dogs, it is easily treated. For some dogs, it is not. They're coming in with several illnesses and parasitic infections, unfortunately. Coccidia is another common one that infects the intestinal tract and can be passed on to people. It's really tragic, and I guess really the question is, why do people continue buying imported puppies, or do they even realize that they're getting, when they're out to buy a puppy, that's where their puppy's coming from?
Right. And mill puppies, too, are fraught with some of these issues as well.
They are, yeah. Whether they're from puppy mills in Europe or third world countries or puppy mills in Canada, yes, it is a problem. But with good breeders who may have experienced that with their dogs, it is easily treated, and it's just being consistent and staying on top of it. And unfortunately, with these brokers, they're just so into turning the puppies over as quickly as possible and maximizing their profit. They are not treating the dogs before they sell them.
Right. Now, for good breeders, as we've been calling them, will they guarantee against these things? Like, will a good breeder say, your guarantee will be X amount of months or years, and we will also guarantee against Giardia, Coccidia, distemper, and those things? Is that a common thing amongst breeders?
That's a really good question, and no, I have not necessarily seen it called out in good breeders' sales contracts for puppies. They will often have a health guarantee, and it might be generalized. The signs of things like Giardia often appear within the first 14 days because the stress of changing homes and acclimatizing to a new environment can sometimes bring it out in a dog. They've also been through a lot of stress being imported from Europe and the travel conditions, which are very, very stark in cargo, etc. So that tends to lower their resistance and cause it to surface. But in terms of good breeders and their contracts, I have not seen intestinal parasites called out specifically, but most of them will say that the puppies are treated for parasites, treated for fleas and ticks, etc., prior to purchase, and they will stand behind that.
Obviously, red flags. What would be the biggest red flags you would think when people are going to buy a puppy? What should they be looking out for, especially when it comes to importers and brokers?
Well, first, the biggest question is to ask, did you breed this puppy? Was the puppy born in Canada? Where did this puppy come from? Some of them lie, and in the ads in Kijiji, for example, and some of them are quite straightforward and say, yes, we imported these puppies from wherever. And they'll claim, for example, that they've got family members in that country who are fantastic breeders, blah, blah, blah. But we're finding out that it's not the case in most cases. I would say the most important thing is to find out where the puppy has originated from. Warning signs should go off, and people should never buy from brokers or people selling imported puppies, whether they claim it's because of family connection and they're not really brokers or not. I would just steer clear of that. But even puppies born in Canada, as you mentioned, can have some of these problems, or may seem to be being sold by a family or a couple, but the puppies are actually coming from puppy mills within Canada, and they're functioning as a broker for domestically bred dogs. So knowing the background of the puppy that you're interested in is very, very important. And knowing that up front is important because you can walk away if something doesn't seem right or if you're not comfortable with their answers before you become emotionally attached to the puppy that you might see in a picture or a video or see in person.
You got to think logically and not with your heart, because once you see that dog, you want to bring him home right away, no matter what. And a lot of people believe that they're rescuing this dog when really they're just perpetuating the issue.
That's true. And for example, with the breed club that I helped to found, we used to have educational booths at Pet Expo once or twice a year, and the purpose was to help people understand, what to look for when they're buying a puppy, what to steer clear of, and that was one of the biggest things that came up. Sadly, people claiming that although they paid up to $5,000 for a puppy, they were rescuing it, when really they weren't at all. They had fallen in love with the puppy when they saw it. In some cases, people have told me that one-on-one, that the puppy looked sick or skinny, it had a pot belly, but they wanted to save it from the people that were selling it. And what's really tragic about that, and very hard to do, is to walk away at that time, because to give them your money and then to absorb the costs of all of the health care for that puppy right from the get-go is just simply putting profits in their pocket.
In talking to a lot of people, a common response from a broker is that they are just doing this for a family member, that they're helping a family member, and they just want to see the puppies go to a good home. Meanwhile, when you do a little bit more research, they have 5 or 6 ads up, and they're helping multiple, let's call them farmers in the area.
And that's a form of emotional blackmail that's very common with puppy brokers, and people need to be aware of that. And as soon as they hear the warning signs, steer clear. There are enough puppies to go around. It might involve a wait list, but it's better to deal with someone who's totally transparent and upfront with you than it is to get these sob stories and get reeled in, and feel some type of emotional and personal responsibility for something that's not has nothing to do with the person looking for a puppy.
There's a few things, other warning signs where I found when transparency is a big issue. And I've talked to many people since starting this podcast, and we get messages all the time, and people are asking us. So I'm talking to this person. I'll give you an example. This person was looking at a golden retriever for $500. They wanted $200 up front and $300 once they met at a Tim Hortons to pick up the dog. No guarantee. Yeah, exactly. No guarantee, nothing, just a phone number and a name. And I told this person, they ended up not getting it, and she seemed a little disappointed and almost a little upset with me for trying to talk her out of it. But what happened was this broker ended up walking away because she was asking too many questions. And I said to her, if you there's no such thing as too many questions. You need to know, if you ask who the vet is and they will not tell you who the vet is, that's a problem. If you ask about the parents and they don't want to give you information, that's another issue. There's just so many warning signs. And I told her, I said, you're hitting all the warning signs here, and you should be happy you didn't get this dog. I promise you, in the long run, you'll be happy about this, because I guarantee you, if you got that dog, you would have issues until the day it dies.
Absolutely. And again, it's a case of a type of emotional blackmail when someone asks decent, honest questions that require transparency, and the broker backs out or, becomes very prickly about it and very vague about the origins of the dog, etc. It's really, really important to do as much homework as possible and to ask around and not feel badly if the broker you think has rejected you or you're rejecting the broker, that the person that's selling the puppies. There really are, particularly in the breed you're talking about, plenty of good, ethical, responsible Canadian breeders for golden retrievers, that it should not, be difficult to find a good, healthy puppy at any time for the breed.
Right, and I was shocked at the price, especially during this time, at $500. And I told her, I was like, well, I'll guarantee you they either have another litter coming and they need to get rid of this one, or there's something shady that they need to get rid of this, these puppies quickly.
Exactly. For example, the puppy could be aging out and it's no longer like a cute little ball of fluff. It might be more like 5 or 6 months old, starting into its gangly teenage stage. Yeah. And they just want to move the puppy on because they've got, many, many puppies lining up at the airport for them to pick up, to turn over quickly like stock.
Yeah, exactly. So jumping back to the importers, what are the logistics and the legal ramifications for importing dogs, and how do they go about doing it? How is it legal for them to be bringing these dogs in? Do you know anything about that?
Yes, I do. Well, anyone can import a dog or several. Questions might be asked by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency working with Customs and Borders about why you're bringing the dogs in. But the reality is anybody can bring puppies into Canada without any type of permit. Commercial sellers, on the other hand, are supposed to have a permit, but I don't know what type of volume, numbers of puppies bringing into the country they're talking about if you have to go up to that level. So basically what happens is someone arranges to bring puppies over from, let's say, Hungary or Ukraine. They pay whatever they need to pay. They work in conjunction with the person in Europe to arrange for transport for that dog. And the dogs arrive at the airport waiting for pickup at one of the warehouses. In order to pick up the dog, a vet that's appointed by Customs or the Canadian Food Inspection Agency is supposed to cursorily go over the dog to ensure that it seems healthy. When I say seem, roughly all they're doing is checking its heartbeat, checking its temperature, and seeing if it has any discharge in its eyes and its nose. But that's it. They will sign off on pretty much any dog, provided it passes that really, really basic test. There's no sort of blood test or stool test, urine test, etc. being done. And they have to rely on the originating country of the puppies, of the vet that signed the vaccination certificates in that country. And if the dog has a pet health passport, they have to rely that has been done in an honest fashion. Unfortunately, we're finding it in many cases it has not. But really the responsibility falls on the importer to pay the customs and duty fees to bring in that puppy, to pick it up. That includes also the fee for the government vet to inspect the puppy, to pick it up from the airport. And from that point on, there's absolutely no involvement of the government or any agencies in Canada with the future of that dog or its state of health.
So what happens in the event that these, the customs agents or the vets there deem a dog unfit? What happens to the dog then? They just send it back?
Unfortunately, that's what they should do. And I think it's tragic because in many cases, the dogs may not survive another 2 or 3 days after shipping in cargo to get back to the country of origin. In some cases, they're probably being kept in quarantine out at the airport somewhere, and who knows for how long, I guess until return transportation can be arranged. But the onus is on the importer and the exporter from the other country to pay for the transport fees for that dog to return. The big question that many people have is what happens to that dog if the dog is returned? And the answer is it's not good.
So I'm assuming what you're saying is they either euthanize it or after the quarantine, if it's deemed unfit, send it to like the Humane Society or something, or is it even that lucky?
Probably not even that lucky. To be honest, I can't say what happens after the return to the originating country because I don't know. In many cases, the puppies are coming from a clearinghouse in Hungary or Ukraine and other countries. So they're born in a puppy mill. They are shipped to a clearance house, basically, in one of these countries that's going to ship them over to Canada. And there are so many people handing off these puppies at different stages that once they're sent back, I don't know what happens to them after they arrive in the airport of the originating country. And that's really sad. That's also part of how people kind of get blackmailed into caring for the puppies if they get one that's sick, because they don't want to send them back to an unknown fate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So I misunderstood you. I thought that, it was up to the importer that once the dog arrived, if it was showing some sign of sickness or something, that was up to them to decide what happens to the puppy. But you're saying that in most cases they would end up sending it back as long as the exporter will have it.
Well, I can't say how much the importer is involved and how much customs is involved in making the decision to ship the dogs back. I can say that very few dogs are sent back. And, for example, since many of the puppies are prepaid, as we found out with the recent Ukraine shipment of over 500 puppies, they're prepaid for by people in Canada before they arrive in Canada, and technically they are owned by the buyers. Mm. Sick or not, the buyers are a different pair of hands handling the dog at that time, and I think that the decision is made that it's up to the buyers as to whether they want to receive the dog or not and take care of it. The brokers, that's an unknown quantity because I don't know what they feel is reasonable. How many dogs out of 5, for example, that don't make it or are very sick, that they don't feel it's worthwhile to try to cure, get shipped back or die in transit or die once they arrive here? It's very hard to say.
Okay, so you just said something about 500 puppies being shipped over here. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes, back in June, a Lufthansa flight bringing puppies from the Ukraine to Canada arrived in Toronto. There were over 500, and out of those, at least 36 died in transit or arrived dead or died at the airport shortly after arrival. This was discovered because a person concerned about animal welfare was picking up a cat that was arriving from Russia, and she saw dead bodies of French bulldogs being put out for the trash and garbage bags at the warehouse for the airline. And wow. The scope of the death and the suffering was extreme. And part of the cause of the deaths were that these dogs were crammed into crates, multiple puppies per crate. They were shipped in cargo. They could have been in transit for days from the originating country by the time they got here. But in some cases, I understand the deaths were caused because at the airport for the originating flight, the puppies' crates were stacked on pallets and wrapped in plastic wrap to keep them together, and so they suffocated.
How is this legal? How can this even happen? It blows my mind.
It's a really good question, and it seems that the Canadian government's response is to say, well, we didn't wrap them in plastic. They just came that way. They arrived here like that. For example, Lufthansa is a German-based airline. The puppies arrived from Ukraine. They could have passed through a puppy clearinghouse in Hungary. So many different stages of what one would think would be levels of responsibility failed. And ultimately, Canadian government will say that it was Lufthansa's responsibility at the airport where the puppies were loaded onto the flight to make sure that didn't happen. But they didn't do their job, and the puppies died.
Now, I agree with that. They should be responsible for that. But I think the Canadian government should also have a standard and some regulations in place that need to be adhered to by these other companies exporting these dogs.
They should, and they should have really, really basic standards of health documentation for the dogs that are being imported into Canada. But they have admitted that they know that that much of the paperwork is forged for the health certificates and vaccination certificates for the puppies that are being brought into Canada, and they claim that there's nothing that they can do. They have to operate on an honor system with these foreign countries and exporters, and we know from experience, sadly, that does not work.
Right. Now, do you know if there's any sort of reform happening or anything being done to avoid this at all?
Yeah, after the nightmare of the Ukraine import, basically a moratorium was placed on importing puppies or allowing imported puppies from Ukraine to come into Canada. However, Ukraine is only just one country. They're coming from all over the world, and not even just Eastern Europe, but there is no moratorium on the importation of puppies from any other country, and the current moratorium could just be temporary, which is a huge problem. There's a group of people fighting to make it permanent. There really is no reason or excuse to import puppies, particularly on a large commercial scale into Canada. But we're having a very difficult time getting any type of cooperation from the government and any type of commitment that they will see this through. They claim that they need legislation, and they seem to feel that they're not empowered to pursue that and to get to lobby for it and to get it put into place so that puppies don't suffer and buyers aren't heartbroken and going bankrupt from vet bills for sick puppies being brought into Canada. But no progress has been made since July.
I'm sure there's loopholes and there's ways around it. They'll ship it through another airline or through different, they'll send it to a different port and then from there.
Unlike here, borders are very close, and it's just sometimes a question of driving for an hour to take the puppies across the border into another country. For example, I mentioned Hungary. I know of dogs that are coming from Croatia and traveling all the way to Hungary to be shipped over to Canada, and the same could be happening with dogs originating in the Ukraine also. There are multiple countries involved in sending puppies to Canada, and they're only really concerned about one country right now, which is tragic. The whole picture needs to be looked at very closely, and it needs to be addressed.
Now, obviously, this shipment was French bulldogs, but what other popular breeds are coming from Europe and imported, basically? It's obviously French bulldogs is a very popular breed here in Canada. Are there others that come close? Yes,
you would be amazed at the number of dogs, for example, that have been popular for years. There are multiple breeders in Canada that are great in producing healthy puppies, but that people are buying dogs through brokers that are being shipped from overseas. Labrador Retrievers, for example. It's just crazy. Golden Retrievers as well. Poodles, Yorkshire Terriers, pretty much any breed that you can think of. It's not just the rare or harder to find breeds. And I just find that amazing because I don't know why people would be willing to take on the nightmare that a puppy has to go through to come to Canada just so that they could have a pet right now, instead of waiting a couple of months to buy from a local breeder.
And I think it's lack of education. I think a lot of people aren't not aware of this. Like I wasn't. And that's part of the reason why my wife and I are doing this, is to educate and help people realize that this is a serious problem. And, it could affect anybody's family. Exactly.
And the days of placing an ad in a local newspaper that's printed hard copy and delivered to your door and finding a puppy there are long gone. And so it's so easy for people to sell puppies internationally online. For the potential buyer, it seems just as easy to say, sure, I'll take this puppy, and not care about where the puppy's coming from, and maybe not realize that dog's being shipped from Romania or Poland or something. But this is why it's very, very important for buyers to do their homework and to understand why it's critical and why the conditions that the puppy that they're buying was raised in are probably horrific, and they shouldn't support by financially, buying puppies from people like that and from brokers who are part of that problem.
Kijiji seems to be a really terrible place to be purchasing a puppy.
It's a nightmare, and unfortunately, Kijiji is run by eBay, which is, I think, very interesting. Organizations for buy and sell like Craigslist have no animal policies across the country, in Canada and the U.S., and that was relatively easy for them to bring in. But eBay and Kijiji are extremely resistant to getting rid of live animal ads on their websites. Unfortunately, a number of people I know, including myself, spend a lot of time reporting all of the ads there, particularly for the breeders and brokers that we know are strictly in it for the money. Kijiji's policy is that they will have ads to rehome animals. And in other words, it sounds like the animal's coming from a rescue, or that it's a family that can no longer support that puppy and is just trying to find a good home for it. The reality is it's mostly brokers selling hundreds, thousands of puppies for many millions of dollars a year on Kijiji. These puppies are not being bred in Canada in many cases. And the ones that are listed on Kijiji, unfortunately, are coming from commercial breeders, people who are breeding strictly for profit, or as we call them in the dog world, greeders. And this can include puppy mills in Canada as well, and backyard breeders.
So if people do, apart from adopting, if people do want a puppy, what would your advice be? Obviously, you've had some issues with not issues, but you've brought up some concerns about the CKC, specifically with French Bulldogs. And you were saying you thought roughly 76% of the French Bulldog breeders were not following CKC standards.
That's right. For example, I'd just like to give a bit of background on the CKC. For example, anybody can join the CKC. There is no background check process. There's not even a requirement for your application to be seconded by an existing or current member of the club who by seconding you basically says, yes, this is a good person. I vouch for this person as a potential member. None of that happens with the CKC, and this also applies to breeders. Now, the CKC has a puppy list on their website where you can look up the breed that you're interested in, and based on region, province, whichever way you want to slice and dice the info, you can find a list of breeders that breed the breed that you're interested in. For example, French Bulldogs. I went through the list when I was working with the CBC for their news coverage, and discovered that 76% of the breeders listed on there for French Bulldogs were not legitimate. They were breeding against the standard, which is part of the code of practice for being a member of the CKC. You must swear that you will breed to the breed standard, and they are not. They're breeding against it. They're breeding for fad colors, which means they can get a lot more money for a puppy that's blue than they can for a brindle puppy or a fawn or cream one. So the CKC really has a huge problem on their hands with the puppy list, because they have no credibility when it comes to listing breeders there, and most of the breeders do not that are on that list. They do not. The breeders that are on the list are simply CKC members. They pay an extra fee of $50 to $100 to have their name included on that list, and that's it. CKC has no oversight on that puppy list, does not check into the breeding practices or the ethical practices of the breeders that are listed on there. And it's buyer beware again, unfortunately, because you would think that would be a great source to find a good breeder.
Yeah.
But unfortunately it isn't. What I would recommend for potential puppy buyers is, after you've researched the breed that you think is most compatible with your lifestyle, run a search on the internet for that breed, say French Bulldog, and regional national breed clubs in your area. So, for example, in Canada, there's a national French Bulldog club, and then there are 2 regional clubs. These clubs are the only groups that actually look into the backgrounds of the people that they accept as members, and also track or follow their breeding practices to ensure that they are ethical and responsible breeders. The club's breeder lists that they publish and have online on the club websites are the best resource to ensure that you're going to get a healthy, happy, well-adjusted puppy, and that has been bred in reasonable circumstances by ethical, responsible breeders who will also back you up, as I'd mentioned earlier, for the lifetime of your dog.
Wow. So Do you know how many breeders are on the CKC list? Not just French Bulldogs, but just overall.
No, I'm sorry, I don't.
Okay.
Most breeders, for example, in French Bulldogs, most good breeders have chosen not to list on the puppy list to protest the unethical breeders that are currently on that list. And they've withdrawn their listings. The 24% of good breeders that are there are great, but it's a crapshoot for a potential puppy buyer to know which one's which, and that's difficult. So again, I come back to contacting the breed clubs within the country and province region that a buyer lives in, and working with them to get recommendations for breeders.
That seems like a shame, because you would think that the Canadian Kennel Club should have been created to avoid this type of stuff. So my guess is that they're making a lot of money through membership, that they should be able to finance, some sort of administrative team to oversee this and to vet these breeders.
Yes, and I think that really good breeders and everybody concerned desperately wishes that that's what they did, or that they were committed to doing that. In my meetings with the CKC, they have not committed to cleaning up the list within a specified time frame. I think they have an overall general goal of improving it, but no game plan, and certainly have not accepted the assistance of people who have offered to volunteer to help them clean up that list and ensure that only good, ethical, responsible breeders are included on it. So now, when it comes to money, the CKC makes money from membership fees, money from people registering kennel names that usually it's called a kennel prefix that's included in the registered name of a dog. They also make money from the registration of litters and puppies born to CKC registered dogs, and those puppies should be registered with the CKC. And really, if anyone's looking for a puppy, although they may feel that they don't need the paperwork for a dog, CKC registration is also equivalent to ownership of a dog. In fact, it's more powerful than a bill of sale. Many people are buying from Kijiji, and they're doing cash-only transactions. There are no puppy sales contracts involved or invoices. With the dog that's registered with the CKC registration may be your only form of ownership certification of a puppy that you buy. So the CKC is really bringing in a lot of money for these services. At the same time, they're only really beholden to the Animal Pedigree Act. They've been appointed by the Agriculture Canada to not enforce, but to administer the registration system for purebred dogs in Canada. Because the scope of that is fairly limited, they feel that they don't have any other responsibilities really to potential puppy buyers. They can't force people to CKC register their purebred dogs. All they can do really is, if people are members of the CKC and selling puppies, part of the code of practice is that they must sell the puppies as CKC registered and provide the registration within 6 months after purchase of the puppy. But that is not being enforced as well. I'm coming across a number of cases of people selling dogs that they claim are born in Canada, are purebred, but they never provide CKC paperwork for. Now, the only ones that are obliged to provide CKC registration for the puppies are the CKC members themselves. But there's no follow-up on whether they're doing that or not, and there's no accountability. And so there are a number of people selling puppies claiming that they're eligible for CKC registration, but they never follow through.
Now, like you said, they said that they are going to be making some adjustments to their policy, but having somebody actually vet these people doesn't seem like it's in the cards at this time.
Exactly. That was my takeaway from my meeting with them and from the news releases that they have published about the situation, and in response to the CBC's national coverage on the problem with puppies and puppy brokers. There's no timeline. There are no deliverables. There are no milestones that have been set, and there doesn't seem to be any type of plan in how to basically fulfill this. So that means that, unfortunately, for the who knows how long, for the near future, people should probably avoid the CKC puppy list when they're looking for a puppy.
That's very unfortunate, because it's almost like there's no hope for people that want to purchase a puppy. So they pretty much have to do the research and, like you said, source some local clubs and get some actual, some people that have dealt with certain breeders and get their feedback and almost like testimonials and stuff in order to purchase a puppy.
It's true, but they should also try to remain objective when they do get testimonials from people. And just in terms of, I'm seeing a lot of recommendations from buyers from unethical breeders, puppy mills, etc., recommending certain people to buy from, and yet they're breeding blue French bulldogs, which are against the standard. They're not CKC registering them. They're just basing it on their emotional reaction to getting a puppy from this person. And what a new buyer needs to do is take a step back and just say, okay, so here's the info that I've got. Here are the breeders that are being suggested. I'm going to look them up on the Breed Club breeders listings and see if these people are also on there. If they're not, don't buy from them. If they are, then move forward and know that you're buying from an ethical, responsible breeder who will back you up. But it does require more work than many people are willing to give. And I guess sometimes I wish that people would realize that if they were adopting a child, they would put more thought into what it is that they're willing to put into buying a puppy. And that's why I mentioned instant gratification and impulse buying. Mm-hmm. Now, a dog is not a child, although people do feel that they're their fur babies. But the most important thing is their health and welfare, their state of mind, behavioral issues as well as physical health is very, very important. And nobody's underwriting this or guaranteeing this in any cases for physical health or mental health for the puppies that brokers are selling or people on Kijiji are selling. They also don't want to know if you buy a puppy and you start having problems with them. You're on your own with that. And so again, it comes back to the Breed Club's breeder lists as being the most reliable resource for quality puppies that are well balanced and in good health with a health guarantee. Really shows that these are the best resources to go to at this time.
Yeah, it seems a name and a phone number on Kijiji that you really have no recourse. You'll be lucky to, most people I've talked to, when they've called back, some of them have blocked numbers, they've deleted their numbers, that they're not using real names. It's just a mess.
Exactly. There's no centralized resource for this sort of buyer beware information either, unfortunately. But the breed clubs tend to keep track of what's going on, and they also can vouch for their member breeders on their lists. But I'm finding that for the bad breeders and brokers that I've been hearing about for many years, they're using multiple names, multiple phone numbers, multiple addresses. There was a case out in Brampton where literally a broker was renting a bungalow and only staffing it from 9 to 5 with people, family members or people that they hired to sell puppies out of that house. Those puppies were alone in crates or pens most of the time, 7 days a week until they were sold. There was no one caring for them.
Wow.
And people don't realize that either. They do go to extraordinary lengths to continue to make great money off of selling puppies. And back to the brokers, for example, I was personally approached by a clearinghouse in Hungary a few years ago asking if I would be willing to buy a number of puppies that were just aging out. They were 5 or 6 months old and they were no longer cute little weenie babies. They offered me 10 puppies for $1,500. And so that was basically $150 a puppy. And they said, you can charge whatever you like for them. We just want to ship these to you, and you can sell them locally for whatever you can get. I declined, of course, but that's when I realized that the markup on these puppies is extraordinary. If you add on transportation, the maximum these puppies are costing people who are selling them here in Canada is maybe $400, but they're tripling that or more. In some cases, they're charging 20 times as much as they pay for that puppy because of the color, etc., on Kijiji. And people don't realize that. It's extremely hard to get a hold of a live person through Kijiji. If you search the website, there are no phone numbers to contact people, and they don't respond to emails. I've also, for example, just as part of my own mission, been reporting breeders on a regular basis off of their lists and reporting them, particularly for the ones that I know are puppy mills or puppy brokers and are selling strictly for profit, not rehoming. It's a commercial operation. I've reported dozens and dozens of them within the last month, and Kijiji has never followed up with me, never responded, never given me an update on what's going on, and essentially they're just ignoring any reports on these ads. So they're choosing to be willfully ignorant, and the reason people are paying money for these ads, and so they're getting ad space at a price, and Kijiji's making a profit off of it. Unfortunately.
Yeah, isn't there in order to sell a puppy or rehome a puppy on there, don't you have to pay to post that ad as well?
Yes. Yeah, and Kijiji gets that money and feels they have no responsibility to potential buyers, about what goes on their pages, basically. So. And
do you know the cost per ad, by chance?
No, I don't. I don't. I will say, though, that many of these brokers are listing multiple ads at the same time, and that's against Kijiji policy, and Kijiji's still not doing anything about that to remove duplicate ads either. So they're not managing their ad space or their the usage of their ad space at all. They just don't want to know.
That's interesting. I can't believe that in 2020 this is still happening, and it's still allowed to happen.
I feel it's even worse, to be honest, Mark. On Facebook, I'm seeing more and more ads selling puppies commercially in all of these groups, no matter what breed or special interest. Dozens and dozens, sometimes hundreds of ads, people flogging everything from stud service to puppies to selling breeding stock, and not just for pets, but in dog fighting circles as well. They're not, Facebook is not managing those groups. They're rejecting most reports of what goes on in those groups. I can't even begin to tell you some of the things that we've come across in investigating this on Facebook, but they just do not want to know, and the sheer volume is very difficult for them to manage. And for every ad that we get taken down, I'm sure there's probably 2 or 3 that pop up again, and probably by the same people. We've seen people using multiple personal accounts, and it's just one person, but multiple pseudonyms or fake names to sell puppies, and also creating retail Facebook pages to sell puppies. And it seems to be, I would say that this nightmare has probably just quadrupled or more because people, again, want instant gratification, and also it's so easy to shop online now. And for everyone looking for a puppy, there's probably 10 people in their area falling over themselves to get them to buy one of their, puppy mill produced or commercially produced puppies.
Yeah. So it seems like the only way to even try and diminish this issue is to educate people and get the people, the buyers, to stop buying these dogs. And otherwise, Kijiji's not going to stop. It seems why would they? If they're making money, especially right now with all the ads that are going up, daily. There's thousands of them just in Ontario. So they're not going to stop. They're making money hand over fist. Kijiji's everywhere. It's not just in Ontario and in Canada, but so I can only imagine how much money they're making on just these ads alone. So for them to stop doing that, why would they?
Well, and it's a really good question because eBay doesn't do that with their buy and sell ads separate from their own website. With the other services that they control in the U.S., they don't sell puppies on them. But for some reason, they seem to think it's okay to continue to allow people to sell puppies and live animals on Kijiji in Canada. I personally think they probably identified that there are some loopholes in legislation in Canada that allow them to function, doing this without any repercussions or accountability. And that's something that, really could be grouped together with the whole issue of imported puppies being sold in Canada. There needs to be oversight. There needs to be some sort of either government organization or ombudsman appointed to oversee this on behalf of the health and welfare of the animals, most importantly, as well as potential buyers.
Yeah, there should be some sort of proper licensing structure. I know every municipality is different for running your own kennel and things like that, but I think there's got to be more provincial and even federal regulations for this.
Well, and really at the federal level, they could, I would think it may be difficult to get it through, but they could administer it very, very easily. But it seems that none of the existing governing bodies really want to take that on or feel they have the budget for it. And the CKC is not appointed to do that. They're not a police sort of force or system for animals. Unfortunately, I think really what's happened too is that the market has evolved and buyers are, our lifestyles have changed and our values have changed. People are looking for puppies for, whether they live in a little condo in downtown Toronto or on a farm in the country or something. People are looking for dogs for better reasons than they were in the past. They want them to be family members and to be part of the family indoors as well as outdoors. And so basically the demand for dogs has increased dramatically, but the supply has not necessarily increased, and this is why they're importing them from other countries. But the reality is the buyer also needs better representation. There really is no group supporting them or hearing them and acting on it. No one is, it seems, is empowered to help them, and most importantly, to help the puppies that are suffering, that are being sold, like chattel by the thousands every day throughout Canada for profit.
Yeah, I agree completely. And another topic which we could probably discuss is the puppies that are being bred, or the dogs that are being bred, not just the puppies, but it's also the adult dogs that are suffering. Some of them are locked up in cages for their entire lives.
Very much so. And for example, I live in the heart of, it seems, puppy mill country, outside, about 2 hours outside of Toronto. And I'm living with it every day here. And I know how many of them are operating as well. But yeah, just to end on a positive note, I really hope we have an opportunity so that I can make some recommendations on what to look for when buying a puppy. What is important, what's not really important. For example, like the color of the dog is not nearly as important as the health and of the dog and the fit for the family and that kind of thing. And why buying from like an ethical, responsible breeder is a positive experience, and people shouldn't be concerned about it, feeling it might be an invasion of privacy, or that they just simply want a dog and they don't want to have to be accountable to anybody. Good breeders can work with everybody, and we want to do the best that we can to help people avoid buying from Kijiji and online.
Thank you so much for being here. I have so many questions. There's so much to talk about. I don't think we can fit it all in an hour, but we will certainly have to do this again. And we all appreciate all your knowledge and all your information.
I really enjoy having the opportunity to talk about it. This is something that really needs to be out in the open. And we, ultimately, we want to help people and we want to help the puppies that are being exploited at this time. We don't want to deny anyone the opportunity to have a pet, but we just want to make sure it's done in the right way and that everybody wins.